I need to tell you something, and I'm going to say it in the most direct way I can. I'm nervous to marry you. And before you hear those words and assume they mean I'm uncertain about you, stay with me, because the truth is almost the opposite. This is a fictional, imagined message, not a real statement from Elon Musk, but picture me sitting across from you, putting everything else aside, and finally saying the things I've been afraid to admit. I'm nervous because when something actually matters to me, I don't know how to treat it casually. I can analyze machines, businesses, probabilities, failures, and impossible-looking problems, but you are not a problem I can solve with an equation. You are a person I could actually lose, and that changes everything. You may look at someone like me and imagine that fear disappeared somewhere along the way. You might think success creates some invisible shield around a person. It doesn't. If anything, the more you experience, the more clearly you understand how quickly things can change. I've learned that you can build something for years and watch circumstances transform it almost overnight. You can believe you understand the trajectory of your life, only to wake up one morning and realize the future has moved in a completely different direction. That understanding follows you into relationships too. It makes you cautious. It makes you question whether something beautiful can remain beautiful once reality begins putting pressure on it. And then you appeared. I wasn't prepared for the way you made me think about things I had deliberately pushed into the background. Marriage, permanence, growing older beside someone, coming home and knowing there is one person who sees beyond whatever the rest of the world sees. Those ideas sound simple when you say them quickly, but they aren't simple to me. They're enormous. When I imagine marrying you, I don't imagine one perfect day, photographs, congratulations, or some glamorous celebration. My mind immediately travels 10 years forward, 20 years forward. I imagine ordinary mornings, difficult evenings, arguments neither of us expected, decisions we have to make together, moments when one of us is exhausted and the other has to carry more weight. I imagine whether we would still choose each other when there is no excitement surrounding the choice. That is what makes me nervous, because I don't want to promise you a fantasy. I want to know whether I can give you something real. There is something that happened inside me that I haven't known how to explain. For a long time, I became comfortable with the idea that my life would always be dominated by the next objective. There is always another problem demanding attention, another deadline, another crisis, another idea that refuses to leave your mind at 3 in the morning. You tell yourself that eventually things will become quiet enough for you to focus on the parts of life you postponed. But eventually is dangerous. Eventually can become never. And meeting you made me recognize that. One night, I was thinking about the future the way I usually do, except something strange happened. Instead of thinking about technology or what humanity might accomplish decades from now, I found myself thinking about something embarrassingly ordinary. I imagined walking through the front door after an exhausting day. And you were there. Nothing dramatic happened in that image. You weren't standing there giving some perfect speech. There wasn't cinematic music playing somewhere in the background. You simply looked at me and smiled like you knew exactly how difficult the day had been without needing me to explain every detail. That image frightened me more than I expected, because I wanted it. I wanted something ordinary. Do you understand how strange that realization can feel for someone whose mind has spent years chasing extraordinary things? Suddenly, I wasn't thinking only about what I could build. I was thinking about who would be beside me while I was building it, and that person was you. That's when the question started. Could I actually make you happy? Could I give you enough of myself? Would you eventually become tired of competing with responsibilities that never seem to end? Would there be nights when you needed me and I wasn't emotionally present because my mind was somewhere else? Would you look at me one day and realize that loving someone whose attention is constantly being pulled in different directions is harder than you imagined? Those questions matter to me because marriage isn't something I want to approach as another achievement. You aren't a milestone. You aren't something to acquire. You aren't another box to check. You're someone whose heart would become partly my responsibility if we made that promise to each other. And that is terrifying. Maybe you've wondered why someone can appear completely confident in one part of life and strangely hesitant in another. It's because confidence is often specific. Being willing to take enormous professional risks doesn't automatically make someone fearless emotionally. Machines don't wake up one morning and decide they no longer love you. A calculation doesn't remember the careless sentence you said during an argument. A rocket doesn't need reassurance that you still see it, understand it, appreciate it. People do, you do, and I would. That vulnerability is what I wasn't prepared for. There was another moment that changed something in me. I imagined you leaving, not because something dramatic happened, but because I had gradually made you feel alone while standing beside me. That possibility stayed with me, because losing someone through one catastrophic mistake is easy to understand. Losing someone through 1,000 tiny absences is different. One missed conversation, one distracted dinner, one promise to make time tomorrow. One moment when you needed affection and received silence. One week becomes another week. Eventually, two people who once felt inseparable begin living parallel lives. That is what I'm afraid of. Not marriage itself. I'm afraid of failing at the parts of marriage nobody applauds. I'm afraid of becoming so focused on solving enormous problems that I overlook the small problems happening inside the person I love. I'm afraid you might say, I'm okay, and I'll be too distracted to notice that you aren't. I'm afraid of assuming you'll always understand, because understanding shouldn't become an excuse for neglect. And something about you makes me want to become better at those things. That may be the biggest reason I'm nervous. You make the stakes feel real. If this were casual, I wouldn't be thinking this deeply. If you were someone I could easily imagine walking away from, there would be nothing to fear. Fear appears because there is something valuable enough to protect. So when I say, I'm nervous to marry you, what I'm really admitting is that the idea of losing you has become emotionally expensive. I don't like admitting that. But it's true inside this imagined conversation. There's another truth I need you to hear. I don't want you to marry an image. The world creates simplified versions of people. Successful, powerful, brilliant, difficult, ambitious, controversial. Whatever label someone chooses, it becomes easier than acknowledging that every human being is complicated. If you marry me, you wouldn't be marrying a headline. You'd be marrying the person who sometimes doubts himself, the person who can become obsessed with an idea, the person who can disappear into his own thoughts, the person who may struggle to explain what he feels at exactly the moment you need him to explain it. You would see flaws that strangers never see. And I would see yours. That's what intimacy actually is. Not two perfect people finally finding each other. Two imperfect people seeing enough of each other to understand exactly where they could cause pain and deciding to become careful with that knowledge. That is the marriage I could believe in. I don't need perfection from you. I need truth. Tell me when I'm disappearing into work. Tell me when you feel ignored. Tell me when something I said hurt you instead of storing it somewhere inside yourself. Tell me when you're frightened. Tell me when you need space. Tell me when you need me closer. And I have to promise myself that I'll listen without treating every emotional conversation like a technical problem requiring an immediate solution. Sometimes you don't need someone to repair the situation. Sometimes you need someone to sit beside you while you experience it. I'm learning that. Maybe slowly. But I'm learning. And if I were standing in front of you right now, there is one question I would want to ask. Can we build something where neither of us has to pretend? Not a perfect marriage, a truthful one. A marriage where disagreement doesn't automatically mean disaster, where silence doesn't become punishment. Where ambition doesn't erase affection, where independence doesn't become emotional distance, where we remain curious about each other, even after we think we know everything, Because people change. You will change. I will change. The person you marry today will not be exactly the same person 10 years from now. So perhaps the promise isn't simply, I love who you are. Maybe the deeper promise is, I want to keep discovering who you become. That idea makes marriage feel different to me. It becomes less like signing a permanent contract with the present version of someone and more like agreeing to travel through change together. There will be versions of you I haven't met yet. There will be versions of me you haven't met yet. Some of those versions may be stronger. Some may be exhausted. Some may be uncertain. Some may need more patience than either of us expects. Would we still recognize each other? Would we still reach across the distance? Would we remember why we chose this? Those are the questions running through my head. But something else happened when I kept thinking about them. I realized fear was giving me only half the picture. Yes, marriage creates the possibility of losing something important. But refusing to love deeply creates another possibility: regret. Imagine being so afraid of losing someone that you never fully choose them. Imagine protecting yourself so carefully from heartbreak that you accidentally protect yourself from the life you actually wanted. That scares me too, maybe more. I can accept failure when I genuinely tried. What I have difficulty accepting is knowing I never attempted something because fear made the decision for me. So I started asking myself a different question. Instead of asking, what if marrying you goes wrong, I asked, what if walking away from you is the mistake? And suddenly the entire calculation changed, because I could imagine surviving heartbreak. Human beings survive extraordinary amounts of pain, but imagining myself years from now wondering what our life could have been, that felt different. I pictured hearing that you had moved on, that someone else wakes up beside you. Someone else hears your thoughts at night. Someone else gets the ordinary mornings I secretly imagined. Someone else knows the little expressions on your face that reveal what you're thinking before you say anything. And in that imagined future, I didn't feel relieved that I had avoided risk. I felt like an idiot. Because sometimes the safest decision creates the deepest regret. So yes, I'm nervous. I'm nervous because marriage would require something harder than confidence. It would require vulnerability. It would require me to admit that another human being matters enough to disrupt my emotional defenses. It would require trust without guarantees, and I'm used to wanting data, evidence, probability, some indication that the system will work before committing enormous resources to it. Love doesn't provide that. There is no simulation capable of proving that two people will remain together forever. No model can guarantee loyalty. No equation can calculate whether someone will still reach for your hand when both of you are old. At some point, you have to choose without knowing everything. That might be the most human thing imaginable. And perhaps that's what happened to me. You brought me to a place where intelligence couldn't eliminate uncertainty. I had to feel it. I had to admit that I care. I had to admit that the future I imagine is no longer populated only by ideas and achievements. You're standing somewhere inside it now, and once I saw you there, I couldn't completely remove you. Believe me, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe this feeling would pass. Maybe I was idealizing you. Maybe distance would make everything clearer. But every attempt to simplify what I felt led me back to the same uncomfortable truth. I don't just want your attention, I want your presence. I don't just want exciting moments with you, I want the boring ones. I want the ridiculous conversations that happen when both of us are exhausted. I want disagreements followed by understanding. I want spontaneous laughter in rooms nobody else will ever see. I want to know what dreams you develop 5 years from now. I want to watch you become more yourself. And I want you to challenge me when I begin becoming less of myself. That is why this scares me. Because wanting a future with someone means handing the future the ability to hurt you. But perhaps courage isn't eliminating that possibility. Perhaps courage is saying, you matter enough that I'm willing to take the risk. So if you're hearing the words, "I'm nervous to marry you," don't hear rejection. Hear confession. Hear someone admitting that beneath all the confidence, ambition, noise, expectations, and complicated history, there is still a human being trying to understand how to hold something precious without destroying it through fear. I cannot promise that every day would be easy. I cannot promise that I would always say the perfect thing. I cannot promise that circumstances wouldn't test us. Those would be dishonest promises. But there is something I could promise. I would never want fear to make the decision for me. If I choose you, I want to choose you with my eyes open. Knowing love is risky. Knowing marriage requires work. Knowing we will occasionally misunderstand each other. Knowing there may be moments when both of us wonder why this feels so difficult. And still saying, "Stay, talk to me, tell me the truth." Let's figure this out together. Because after everything that happened inside my mind, I finally understood something I should have understood much earlier. The person who makes you nervous about marriage might sometimes make you nervous precisely because they are the person you can actually imagine marrying. And you became real enough for me to be afraid, but you also became important enough for me to stop running from that fear. So yes, I'm nervous to marry you. But maybe the sentence I've really been trying to say this entire time is much simpler. I'm nervous because I can finally imagine saying yes and meaning it.